to improve one's character. The idea of self-work, the idea of deep introspection, inner thinking about one's character and one's virtues is not a new age concept, nor new to our time. Talmudically, the rabbis were well aware that we likened the complexity of human existence to the divine image. And when we spoke about being created in the Tselem Elohim, in the divine image, we mapped a series of qualities and character traits, midot, that we could identify individually, measure out, and work on improving were we to focus on those aspects of our personhoods. Fast forwarding through the chapters of Jewish history, let me now connect some people you might have heard of before in a way that maybe you've just not linked together. First, I'll mention the name of Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the famous Italian mystic and philosopher, writer of commentaries and creator of a manual called Derech HaChaim, the way of life, that spelled out some of the greatest Jewish values we ought to embrace, as he read through his version of Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot, and made a manual of sorts for holy living. Luzzatto's work must have made it, either in the original or in translation, to our friend Ben Franklin. The Ben Franklin of the American colonial scene, the thinker, the man interested in the human psyche. And then I'll link the name Menachem Mendel Levin, the author of Cheshbon HaNefesh, Accounting of the Soul, who picked up on Ben Franklin's manual of self-improvement, who was inspired by that great rabbi, that great sage, that great mystic, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, whose life began in Italy, continued on to Amsterdam, and finally ended in Akko, where he spent the last 3 years of his life teaching the mysticism he so loved. So how does that trail work? Luzzatto's work, Derech HaChaim, the way of living, the way of our lives, the way of life, outlined many qualities and character traits that Ben Franklin became aware of, but wanted to systematize. So Franklin, in the moral revolution of the early 1800s that really was worldwide, decided that he was going to create a chart and look at what he considered to be the essentials of every religion, and explained that he had a systematic way of looking at 13 different attributes, a number we know well because of God's 13 attributes that we make mention of, especially during the month of Elul and near High Holy Days time. And he understood any divine influence in life as being the inspiration and the entity as prizing, as holding so valuable, the doing good of man. Franklin indeed supported religion in general, though we know him as a deist more than as any particular denominationalist. And he appreciated very deeply, for the welfare of our society, the engagement with sacred sources, so that there could be unique plans for moral improvement in our lives and in our world. So in his published autobiography, Franklin described as a bold and arduous project of arriving at moral perfection, he focused his readers on a simple chart. It was a grid. It had 7 columns, 1 for each day of the week, and 13 rows for each of the moral qualities. Franklin hoped to improve temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, and humility. By the end of the year, a person could, after repeating this cycle several times, of 13 weeks for the 13 traits, he hoped the regimen would guarantee a high moral character, and especially if one were to pursue that over a lifetime, he explained, it could really result in finding oneself fuller than one expected, both fuller of faults than one expected, as one would do some self-examination and introspective work, and fuller of the good that the deity hoped for and that we know is essential for our lives and society. He published that description of his self-examination plan because he considered it an excellent device for the moral instruction of all people. His autobiography traveled quickly through the United States. It succeeded in Great Britain and continental Europe. And it also made its way to Eastern Europe. And that's where Menachem Mendel Leffin comes in. Leffin is known to us as the author of a manual for character improvement called Cheshbon HaNefesh, Accounting of the Soul. He's a disciple of Moses Mendelssohn, and he was looking to preserve traditional Judaism while introducing Jewish readers to Enlightenment ideas, modern scientific theories, and general literature as well. He published a variety of religious and secular works, and translations as well. But in this case, he didn't translate Franklin's work entirely. What he did was borrow from Franklin's order of 13 different virtues and create for the Jewish reader, tied to Jewish sources that would enhance his presentation, a chart of his own, a systematic way of taking a self-evaluation to, as Franklin said, become surprised and fuller, more fully aware of all the faults and more fully in possession of all the virtues that make for holy living. Leffin's 13 virtues were equanimity, patience, order, resolution, cleanliness and humility, justice and frugality, industry, silence, tranquility, truth, and separation, holiness, especially from lewd and wrongful thoughts. He thought about our lives as needing some rigorous discipline, suggested that prayer time could be used for reflecting on these matters, but that more than just prayer time was required. And he likened this and appropriately so, to the long tradition of literature like Luzzato's The Ways of Life, Derech HaChaim, The Ways for Holy Living, that were central to the Jewish tradition. When he talked about it as an accounting of the soul, he was also doing something wonderfully intellectually appropriate for his age. Commerce and commercialism were such a part of this blossoming new world of the 19th century, from Eastern Europe to Western Europe to the New World. His use of the term accounting of the soul plays on that wonderful marketability of religious tradition, the borrowing of commercial terminology in order to sell folks on a pursuit not only of the resources they need and the businesses they want to begin, but to do the business of the soul and to expand their lives and possibilities of the holy and good life with the inner resources that were necessary. The acquisition of those resources, those character traits, those virtues that one needs in order to rise to new levels, to become aware of one's selfhood and realize more potential, were at the core of his project and that which he sought to sell folks in his new book. And remember how new the technology was of small books or books themselves, helping spread new ideas. Just like, I should make the parallel, these videos and our computers are new technologies that help us share and spread wonderful ideas, ideas anchored in the past and rooted in the holiest sources of our tradition. It's Rosh Chodesh Elul and it's Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov. A Shabbat of comfort and a new month of deep introspection, building one's connection to the virtues that can allow us to see our lives flourish and to build a more holy world.